Hello again, everybody. This is Brother Chooch for Thinking Out Loud About the End Times. This is Night Watch, a nighttime fellowship for those who are awaiting the soon return of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, to pull us out of this Grinch's stomping grounds and into the clouds where we will see him face to face for the first time and be changed, and then he will take us to the place that he has been preparing for us for about 2,000 years. Thus we'll be with the Lord forevermore. And that's our blessed hope. I hope that you had a happy holiday, and as always, it's a pleasure that I can have this period of time with you. I know that your time is valuable. I know that this is an absolute privilege to be able to think out loud about these matters with you. And so I definitely thank you from the bottom of my heart that you would take the time to join us and to have a little fellowship and to really think about the end times. And I know this isn't the favorite subject of most people. There's a lot of other things that people want to talk about this time of year, and this may, for some, seem like a somber subject or a topic that most people don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole, but we talk about these things because we want to consider strongly what the Bible says, especially about the times that we live in, and just where are we in God's prophetic timeline, because we do know that we will be aware of the season that we're in. And it also speaks of us not to forsake the gathering together of the saints, the believers, as we see the day approaching. So Scripture is clear on two things. One is that we're aware of the season that we're in. We're in the season of the end times. And also we'll see the day approaching. And when it uses the word day in that particular context, I think it's referring to a 24-hour period of time, but rather a time noted for a particular thing. In our case, we're referring to the end times, the day approaching his return, and then the subsequent tribulation period. So here we are ending 2024, and of course the Lord, if he so chooses, can come back tonight. He could come back on the 30th. He could come back on the 31st. And he's welcome to come back on January 1st, 2025 if he wants to, because he and only he has control over that. And we're very thankful that one thing is absolutely certain, that if you have placed your faith in Jesus Christ, who is indeed the Son of God, who lived a perfect life without sin, perfectly pleasing to the Father, who voluntarily on our behalf went to the cross and laid down his own life and shed his own blood and became our sacrifice for paying the full price for our sin, that he has offered us a salvation where he did all the work, and all we have to do is believe in him, and that he rose again 3 days later. What a blessing. What a terrific blessing that is certain. Now, some people are complaining about the volume, okay? So if you give me a moment, I'm going to see if I could make an adjustment on that. Hopefully, this is oftentimes a challenge for me to do. Okay, let me go up a little bit there. And let me see. Advanced auto properties. Let's see. Microphone, I would imagine. Let's go up a little bit. Let's see. Make sure the knobs are correct. I think that seems to be okay. And push this up a little bit. Okay, so let me know if that's any better. I hope it is, because I don't know how much more I could do. Let me just go up a little bit more here. I hope that helps. Let me see. Let me see if I could get some feedback here. Volume is good. I can hear you just fine. Volume is good. Volume is good for me. And if you happen to be on a cell phone, you may want to use your headset because that might be a little bit harder to hear me. Okay, it seems like people could hear me okay. And again, I apologize for the technical issues if you are having any. Now, this is what tonight's program's about. I want you to understand that there are a lot of people out there just kind of focusing on, and I understand that. I have the question in my head. Why are we still here? It's at the end of 2024, and we have not been raptured yet. Why are we still here? And tonight's program is going to encourage you to be a detective. I'm going to present you with some facts and quote-unquote evidences from things that happened from 2017 that is still going to current day. And I want you as a detective of the end times. And I'm going to show you my little graphic here. This is Triple W, also known as that Wasco Wapcher Wabbit. And he's doing a little investigating himself. Okay? He is looking for clues to see. That's right. So picture of himself magnified a bit with his inspector glass there, the magnifying glass, inspecting what has occurred from 2017 to now and coming to a decision of, are these facts and evidences legitimate and pointing to a soon coming rapture and tribulation period? And so I'm going to let you, the audience, decide of a number of things that have happened in the last 7 years that I believe have been building up to where we are at today. So if we're at that place where we're saying, how come we're still here in 2024? I want to encourage you to pause and look at what I'm going to show you that's happened in the last 7 years and just decide in your mind, is God indeed using these things to get us to that place where he's about to take the church away? And the time of Jacob's trouble, which will be 7 years, by the way, will happen. Now, if you are in a place of skepticism, I'm just going to ask you to watch the whole video before you cast judgment. Because there might be bits and pieces where you say, you know what, bro, Chooch, that doesn't hold much weight for me. But that next thing you showed me, it's something that I have to consider. I want you to be able to see everything before you just, sign off and cast your decision too quickly. Okay? So, if you've been like me, who has been watching for the return of Christ fervently since 2017, the last 7 years absolutely has been, I think, remarkable. And so you might say, well, Brother Chooch, why are you choosing 2017? And part of it is because I believe that the Lord has shown us in the cosmos certain things happening to get our attention. Okay? And I think the Lord is quite aware that in the year 2017 that we were going to have software and we were going to have all these things so we can clearly see things that are happening in the planets, in the stars, in the moon, in the sun, better than we could ever have in the past, because we have a technology now that we didn't have 20, 40, 60 years ago. All right. So what really drew me is the Revelation, not the Revelation 12 site, but the Great American Eclipse. And what was remarkable about this on August 21st of 2017 is that, and I'm going to spare you all the details, but mainly it was a major event of a solar eclipse that in its totality went over 6 or 7 Salems and cut from the northwest across America and exited a bit southeast. So it kind of made a line through the United States. And what was amazing about this is, as you know, just kind of tradition lends itself to, something to do with the moon seems to be a harbinger, like a blood moon needs to be a harbinger for Israel. But the sun, because Gentiles mostly go off of a solar calendar. Gregorian calendar is a solar calendar. Speaks of a harbinger for the Gentiles, and so here the greatest Gentile nation in the world gets this ominous eclipse, and in and of itself, you say, well, an eclipse is an eclipse. True, but here's this eclipse that happens in 2017 and just kind of cuts through America, and for some reason cuts through all these Salems. All right. And so we thought this was remarkable because I believe about 33 days later, we have then another maybe more impressive celestial event happen, and that's the Revelation 12 sign. And that happened on September 23rd, 2017. Some would argue it was a once in 7,000 year event. And it seems to replicate what happened in the constellations here. And again, this is astronomy. This is not astrology. Big difference, and I'm not going to get into the details why. But when you look at the Revelation 12 chapter in the book of Revelation, verses 1 and 2 seem to refer to this, what actually happened in the cosmos during the time of September 23rd. All right, in the months leading up in that. So we have Jupiter, which is known as the king planet, in the womb of Virgo for the same length of a gestation period, going forward and then in retrograde, and then being birthed, if you will, on the Feast of Trumpets on September 23rd, 2017. And so even though the rapture didn't happen that day, it's still a remarkable sign that occurred. And I am still chewing on it and trying to understand exactly what this was pointing to, because this is definitely a sign in the sun and the moon and the stars where you would say, okay, is this pointing to what seems to be a birth? Okay, and the male child gets harpazoed up to heaven before the dragon can devour the child, and then the woman Israel flees from the dragon. Sounds like a picture of rapture and tribulation. Right? So that happened in 2017. So we see these really attention getters, and I know there's a lot of Christians who were drawn to this for a season of time and then just kind of shrugged their shoulders and said, this is nothing. Well, I still think it's something. I'm not exactly sure what it was pointing to, but I believe that the Lord allowed this to happen because, after all, He's in charge of the heavenly bodies and when they do and what they do and how they do, right? So that happened in 2017. Now, I don't want to jump all the way to let me just show the graphic. You have this in happening in 2024. We'll go back to that because there's some amazing things that happened before the second passing of this in 2024. But if you notice, in 2017, some really interesting things also started to happen, but not necessarily in the sky, but on planet Earth. And let me start with this one. We had the Abrahamic House of Faith was agreed upon to be built. And this is pretty amazing because we strongly get the sense as we read through the book of Revelation that there's going to be this formation of a one world religion. And this Abrahamic family house was brokered by Pope Francis on behalf of the Catholic Church, on Ahmed El Tayeb on behalf of El Azhar Mosque, on February 4th of 2019, and did become open, I believe, in 2021 or 2022. So what was amazing about this whole Abrahamic family house is that in it, it has a mosque and a synagogue and a church. And the thinking here is that these three religions that quote-unquote came from Abraham, which isn't entirely accurate, share this area and kind of have harmony with one another. And I believe that it's prophetically significant because Pope Francis, who's done an absolutely wonderful job either impersonating the future false prophet, or maybe he is the false prophet after all, I don't know for sure, has taken a giant leap forward in sort of skewing the lines between religions. And definitely heading in a place towards a one accepted world religion. Okay, so that's been in the works. And that right now, Abu Dhabi, you're able to go there and visit these three impressive architectural wonders. Okay, so that occurred. But even before that, actually, something very significant happened with the first term that President Trump had. And it was the Abraham Accords. So we see that Abraham used again. Abrahamic family house, Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords was a bilateral agreement on the Arab-Israeli normalization, signed between Israel and United Arab Emirates, and between Israel and Bahrain, if I'm saying that right. And that happened September 15th, 2020, and it was mediated by the United States, and it became really a groundbreaking achievement to have this sort of unity and agreement and normalization between Arab countries and Israel. And the reason why it's significant is because it's ultimately, I believe, the beginning formation of what eventually will evolve into, I believe, the covenant with many. Now, let me just read to you something really amazing here. Back in December 6th of 2017, President Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital. Now keep in mind, this is a little bit after these celestial signs. On December 6, 2017, President Trump recognized Jerusalem as the ancient capital of the Jewish people and the capital of the state of Israel. He then said that the United States Embassy in Israel will move to Jerusalem. So they're just kind of putting an exclamation point on his statement. He also said back in 2017 that he recognizes that Jerusalem is a highly sensitive issue, but he thinks that this will contribute to a peace process aided by, does not think that a peace process that is aided by ignoring the simple truth that Jerusalem is home to Israel, legislation that he was going to deal with that, because Jerusalem is such an esteemed city for multiple faiths. By him coming straight out and saying Jerusalem belongs to Israel, he felt that that's not going to impede the peace process. Then President Trump reaffirms that the United States does support the status quo at the Temple Mount, known as Haram al-Sharif, and that he's committed to, listen to this, the peace process of achieving a lasting peace agreement between Israelis and Palestinians. Do you see that? That was back in 2017. So the significance of this seems to be building, because I believe that the two-state solution will be in play in the language and in the terms of the covenant that is made stronger, confirmed with the many. And I'm not saying Donald Trump is the Antichrist, but we have to give Donald Trump perhaps some credit for the beginning aspects of this covenant, which is really mind-blowing to think that the Abrahamic Accords will eventually evolve into this most famous, notorious covenant in Daniel chapter 9. And we do know that Netanyahu, who desperately wants to have an Abraham Accord with Saudi Arabia, will most certainly be wanting to sign that to open up that alliance with a very powerful Arab country. But they made it very clear, Saudi Arabia, that they will not even consider that unless Palestine has a state. So you can see things working prophetically towards this. And that happened, my friends, in 2017. We had significant things happen in 2020, in 2017, and guess what happened in 20, and I'm going to be very careful of what I say here. I'm going to sound very nebulous. And I'm going to be very nebulous because this is the very subject matter that has got me in jail here several times. Okay, so I'm gonna talk in very vague terms. In 2019, late 2020 and 2021, and even parts of early 2022, the world experienced a plague, if you will. And this plague that most of us experienced cost the lives of many, and it brought out certain things that happened that we have never seen before. There is a technology that is either out there or will be out there that is working itself towards something that will be fulfilled in the future that involves buying and selling. I'm not going to say anything more about this, but I just want to say this last thing. This occurred between 2017 and where we're at now. I believe that what occurred with this is very prophetically significant. The scripture talked about pestilences happening in the end, right? These are part of the birth pangs. Well, folks, we experienced that, and we may experience more of that. I'm going to stop there. Another thing that I think is worth mentioning is this release of footage from the Pentagon that was taken by U.S. Navy pilots, which I believe is the first time that this had ever been done in U.S. history. I mean, I'm not saying that there hasn't been talk on news about UFOs and aliens, but never when you have a governmental branch, an agency, come out and disclose something of this magnitude to the public, to declassify something and make it public. So this occurred in 2020. There were 3 videos of unidentified, what was called aerial phenomena, a UAP. They don't call it UFOs, a UAP, an unidentified aerial phenomena. And these videos, these footages were released to the public. And since then, if anything, we have had more talk and more discussion, even before Congress, about UAPs, UFOs, aliens, and now 2024 drones. So really weird stuff that just hasn't been spoken on in the past. So what is the significance of this? I believe that this possibly can be setting us up for the lie that the Antichrist himself will speak of in the future. And so what is this lie? Well, we're not sure what this lie is, but we know that the Lord is going to allow there to be strong delusion. So those who have, actually it's in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Let me read this to you. I'm going to start at verse 9. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders, referring to the Antichrist, with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they have not received the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie. Do you see that? That they should believe a lie. So this could very well be tied into the explanation of why so many people disappeared suddenly, and the explanation given that had been concocted by the Antichrist and his minions to believe that there's some sort of explanation that aliens, UFOs, or whatever took us away, instead of what the truth is, which would be the rapture of the church. And that God would send strong delusion that they would believe the lie, those who are what? Who will not believe the gospel. And so we've seen that since 2017, really 2020, and even today, this subject becoming spoken on more and more. And I believe it's just going to continue to go that way. We can't forget this. Sustainable development. Sustainable development. These are the goals that have been presented. You could call it Agenda 2030, but basically, this was the plan that is agreed upon by the nations of the United Nations to work towards sustainability. Basically, the thinking is that the world is not going to be able to sustain life at the rate that we're going. And we need, or the United Nations needs nations to lead their people to strive in these areas in order to sustain life and development on planet Earth. And so it addresses things like poverty and education and this, that, and the other thing. But the bottom line is, behind all these goals, there's a lot of control that needs to be forfeited in order for this to be fully implemented. And that in of itself becomes a problem. One is this really a global crisis, or a crisis that is being built up in such a way in order for some pretty significant changes to be made in the effort to save planet Earth? Now, some people who are been studying Bible prophecy believe that this is just lending itself again to this end time agenda and covenant with the many to work towards a green globalistic governing body that controls people's carbon usage, your carbon footprint, and your social scores, and it becomes a place where if you do not do these things, then you are harming the planet and you are harming your fellow man and fellow woman. And this is the sort of new religion that's being presented along with Chrislam, that we must save the planet, which is a really, I think, a joke. Because the planet, I'll give them this, the planet is in bad shape. But we in and of ourselves cannot rescue the planet in the condition that it's in. And the sustainable goals aren't going to do it either. It's going to take the direct intervention from Christ and Him alone to be able to do that. But just the presentation of the United Nations, because if you are watching the end times, keep an eye on what comes out of the United Nations, because it is definitely a anti-God, and now becoming probably more anti-Semitic more than ever, organization, which is basically pushing globalism. And so even the formation and launch of this, why 2030? Well, depending on when the tribulation period starts, 2030 possibly could be the midway point, or a little after, a little before the midway point of the tribulation, based on kind of where we're at right now. So we'll see how that plays out. Now, again, when the Antichrist comes on the scene, he could take all this stuff and kind of manipulate it and set it to be on for his agenda and accomplish what he wants to get done. But this is what's going on right now, because really, I believe from 2017 to current day that we're in, the table has just been set really well to hand this off to the man of perdition so he could do his agenda, which might not be Agenda 2030, but he could use this stuff in whatever his agenda will be. And of course, he's going to have trillions and trillions at his disposal, as King Charles said not too long ago. The other thing that's been, I think, really significant is this alliance that really, I believe, became stronger and solidified. And basically, it's sort of like an anti-America three-country union. But what you have here are basically the main players in the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war. Putin very well could be Gog, mentioned in Ezekiel 38. We don't know for sure, but he certainly could be Gog, or the spirit of Gog works through him. But what we do know is that these three individuals really have joined forces and have connected and working with each other economically and perhaps militarily. It doesn't surprise me that this formation has taken place and will continue to take place as we approach this Ezekiel 38 and 39 war. We know that Turkey has spoke strongly about Jerusalem and against Israel. We know the situation with Iran, and we know Russia, too, is very interested in what's going on between Israel and Iran. So this union here that has really become solidified, I think is prophetically significant, especially in what is yet to come. And it'd be very interesting also to just see how things play out between Israel and Iran in the days and the weeks and the months to come. This is something that I think was prophetically significant too that occurred. Now, there was some pretty significant earthquakes that had occurred in Turkey. And it caused a lot of damage. I'm going to read you an excerpt from this article here. Cradle of early Christianity largely destroyed by earthquake. The city of Antioch, where the believers were first called Christians, has been all but wiped out by the recent earthquake that struck Turkey and Syria. As the death toll continued to climb beyond 37,000 victims, the recent massive earthquake in Turkey and Syria, people in the Turkish city of Antioch, one of the oldest places connected with the spread of Christianity, are staring at a pile of rubble. Antioch is experiencing an enormous disaster. The 75-year-old Jesuit head, Bishop Paolo Bazzetti, said, "The current inhabitants of this ancient city, which dates back to 300 BC, continue searching for remaining survivors. Antioch's 70% of the city in Antioch was razed to the ground. The ancient city is now in ruins. Paul and Barnabas, who followed the call of Christ to evangelize the surrounding cities, was the home to this missionary effort. Barnabas left for Tarsus to look for Saul, and when he found him, he brought him to Antioch. And it happened that they stayed together in the church a whole year, instructing a large number of people, we read in the Acts of the Apostles. The church, as we know it today, was born in Antioch. So that was really affected strongly. But basically, the whole area of where the seven churches, the letters to the seven churches in Revelation, this is the area where the earthquake struck. Okay, I'm going to show you another picture, and I'm wondering if you could make out a number here that relates to the seismic activity that took place with this earthquake, which I think holds some significance. This graphic shows it better, and I'm going to enlarge it for you. Do you see that? You had a 7.8 on the Richter scale earthquake where this red star is. See that? Right there is where the earthquake struck. Major one, right? Another big one happened over here. But if you notice here, look at this. Can you make out the number 7? You see that? 7 churches in Turkey in the area of the early church, major earthquake, and you have the number 7. And obviously Antioch took it on the chin. Again, these are the letters in the book of Revelation. Now, if you want to kind of just shrug your shoulders and say, well, it's just coincidence that it kind of looks like the number 7, but in light of everything else, I don't think it's something we should just shrug off. I think it just kind of speaks of, again, the end times that we're in. So I found it that this was prophetically significant. And we know that earthquakes is part of the birth pangs. And when you have an earthquake in this particular area, forming the number 7, it's got to go into at least the pile of evidences that we're looking at of what has occurred from 2017 to current day, and just say, okay, something to pray about and to consider. Red heifers. We have had news about the red heifers for sure. Because the red heifers that the Temple Institute in Israel traveled to Texas and purchased from an evangelical Christian who raised these beauties, they were purchased and flown over to Israel for about the sum of $500,000. So you got 5 red heifers. So if you guys have some loose change sitting around, for a mere price of $500,000, you may be able to contact this rancher the next time he has 5 red heifers, viable kosher red heifers available, and fly them overseas for $500,000. And so these red heifers that were purchased are now still in the custody of the Temple Institute. But unfortunately, 2 or 3 of them have become disqualified because they have developed some white hairs. But let me read you a little something here because I found this to be pretty interesting. Let me just pull up the article. Give me a second here. Okay. So this is from a website called Free Grace International. These red heifers arrive in Israel, and the question is, could this be the end times? And I'm trying to find what year this happened. I want to say 2022. Yeah, 2022 this happened, okay? So, 5 red heifers arrive in Israel late Thursday, and it has to do with Texas. As you may know, the red heifers are basically a cow with red hide, and it's required for the practice of traditional Mosaic law in Israel. The red heifers are used to create the water of purification. There are some technicals according to Numbers 19, but the gist is this: without a red heifer, the temple system is dead in the water. One tiny problem: red heifers are incredibly rare. Rabbis estimate that only 9 of them were ever found and used in 2 eras of the temples in Jerusalem. Of course, the next temple, they call the third, is still waiting to be built, but many of the implements and instruments for temple worship have already been made. 500 men with the right lineage have been trained to perform priestly duties. There are plans to build another temple on the Temple Mount. Of course, it's complicated because I always get this mosque pronounced wrong. El Esca Mosque, the Dome of the Rock, occupies much of the real estate, but there are plans that make a shared space a real possibility. However, without a red heifer, there's no kosher way to jumpstart a new temple build. It's like having a car and the red heifer is the key to start the ignition. So about a decade ago, the search for a red heifer began in earnest. Many cows in Israel were inspected, but there wasn't any viable options. So the agency was searching and looking abroad. There's no rule that says a red heifer has to come from Israel or from a Jew. In fact, there's rabbinical stories that the red heifer was bought from a non-Jew on a Texas ranch. Now, this is how this becomes a Texas story. A group of Texas ranchers who happened to be Christians got wind that a red cow was needed, a red cow to help Israel. Now, that's something we could do. That's the Texas attitude. A group even took out ads that other Texas ranchers would see and spread the word. The ads encouraged Texas ranchers to set aside any red heifers that were born to their herd. There was an obvious problem, though. One of the requirements for red heifer is that it has to be without blemish. And that's a tall order in Texas, since Texas law requires every cow or bull born. Listen to this. Every cow or bull born in the state of Texas must be marked with an ear tag. That constitutes a blemish. Now think about that. But you want to know what happened? Listen to this. Now, here's where the story takes an interesting turn. At the height of COVID, many people were not coming into work. A certain Texas ranch reports that a group of 5 red heifers were born in one litter. An incredibly rare occurrence within itself. More amazingly, still, it was during COVID. The employee who normally puts the ear tags didn't come into work that day. So these 5 red heifers remained unblemished. When they were about 8 or 9 months old, rabbis were called to inspect them. It wasn't long that the group of Israeli rabbis from the Temple Institute showed up at Comanche, Texas, to inspect the sibling set of red heifers. Apparently, they passed the test, and they arrived in Israel late Thursday. So, I mean, isn't that amazing? Do you see with God's will how things could work out? If they simply tagged the ears of these cows, they would be considered to have a blemish. So it's just amazing. And so now in Israel, there are 2 or 3 viable red heifers that very well, and all is needed is one, by the way, that could be sacrificed, or maybe one is already sacrificed for all we know. And the ashes used for the purification rituals for the temple and the people. And so this happened in 2022. And here we are in 2024. And so I think that that is very significant. Here's another thing to take note of. This is the Euphrates. The Euphrates River. And I would like to read parts of another article that speaks on this, just so you know that the Euphrates River plays a role in the book of Revelation. So that's why I included it into our discussion this evening. The Euphrates River has been and is drying up. This is from Encounter Today. Is the drying up of the Euphrates River the fulfillment of Bible prophecy? Now, this was published in January 31st of 2023. What is happening to the Euphrates River? The Bible predicts that in the last days, the Euphrates River will dry up to prepare the way for the kings of the east to pass through. The river itself is a massive land barrier that would hinder any army from advancing east to west. At more than 1,800 miles long and an average of 300 yards wide, the Euphrates River has been a substantial source of life in the region. Revelation 16 verse 12 says, "The sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up to prepare the way for the kings from the east." The Bible doesn't say who the kings of the east are, and biblical scholars and theologians have different ideas about who they are. One popular interpretation is the kings of the east are reference to the rise of China and other Asian nations as powerful political and economic entities. John predicts in Revelation 9:16-18 that these kings of the east will boast a standing army of 200 million. This is a bold prophecy, especially when you consider that at the time of the writing, there weren't 200 million people on the planet. However, you read this today, China has an army of more than 200 million, just as the Bible predicted. It's also worth noting that whatever the kings of the East are, they are seen as a formidable force in the end times and going to be a part of the final battles that will take place before the return of Jesus. Either way, this massive army will need to cross the Euphrates on their way to the Valley of Armageddon. Recent news articles have reported that the Euphrates River is indeed drying up. According to the study by the University of Arizona, the river flow has decreased by more than 60% over the past century due to dams and irrigation projects in Turkey, Syria, and Iraq. Okay, so I'm going to pause there because if you look at this graphic here, do you see anything unusual? When the Euphrates River is running pretty well on the left, I mean, it's certainly taking a weird kind of course there. It does a little loop-de-loop and then a curl. But because it's drying up, and you get this graphic, this is probably from Google Earth, it actually seems to make the symbol of Omega, the Greek letter Omega. And when we think about Omega, we can't help but think about the title that God gives for himself as the Alpha and the Omega. That could be Christ's name too. The Alpha, the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega. I find it interesting that when, and maybe the Lord planned this from the get-go, that when the river dries up, you could actually see the Omega sign. Which is, can't put it past God to do something like that. If we go just to the significant event that occurred this past year, this is what I referred to earlier, and now I want to come back to this graphic. The Alpha and the Tav. Now you can't really see that, but if you look at all the three major eclipses that happened, 2017, and then there was an annular one in the end of 2023, which happened to exit through Corpus Christi of Texas. And then the one that happened earlier this year in April 8th of 2024. If you look at these way that these paths crisscross each other, it seems to make both an Alph and a Tav. The first and last letter, I believe, of the Hebrew alphabet. So April 8th, we mentioned the significance of the Salems that were passed the first time. Salem means peace. And when it made the cross that had the X that went over Little Egypt, so this section here, southern Illinois, is referred to as Little Egypt. And that's where the X is, which is interesting because Egypt is a picture of the sinful, lost world that we live in. I have a hard time saying that this is coincidence that all these cities that were in the path of the eclipse in 2024, look at the Ninevehs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Ninevehs. And also, we see Rapture, Indiana. There's actually a town in Indiana called Rapture. See that? Right here. Rapture, Indiana. I think that the population is only one person, and I think he's agnostic. But then you also have Jonah, Texas, right? Get that sort of Jonah theme here, right? With all these Ninevehs. And also passed over the Ark that's in Williamston, Kentucky. But again, since, we're still here, no rapture, no tribulation period, people just say, oh, these eclipses didn't mean much, did they? Well, I think they did. Especially when you have the most powerful Gentile nation on earth getting an X marked over it. Isn't something that I want to completely dismiss. It's got my attention. And in light of everything that the United States has done, I think that we have to be maybe considering, is this a warning of judgment, impending judgment to come on our nation? Now, there's some honorable mentions here that I would like to touch on, because I know that I touched on several things that have occurred the last 7 years. But there's some honorable mentions I think that we need to consider. One is AI has really taken off, especially the last couple years. I think if you were to paint a broad paintbrush and just say man trying to play God. I think AI would be included in that. I think artificial intelligence, and also the things that we've been trying to do in labs, splitting genes and trying to just clone and do things that I believe are out of bounds for humanity, I think has to draw God's attention, especially when we start messing with his image, because he made man in his image. And so if we're going to interfere with the image of God by messing around with the DNA and RNA and Neuralink, and getting to a place where we're starting to form this hybrid, half human, half robot, half computer, I think the Lord's going to intervene before we just mess up the whole gene pool. Because Jesus died for human beings. He didn't die for demons. He didn't die for robots. He didn't die for, I think, half humans and half cyborg, whatever. Just big problem there. So I think the advancement of AI gets, and also CERN, I think, falls into that category. What exactly is going on in CERN? What are you trying to accomplish there? What kind of portal are you trying to open? We know Pope Francis did some opening of portals on Christmas Eve. And what are you doing over there? I believe in Switzerland, with that atom smasher. Because the rituals and the ceremonies they have for this place certainly don't seem scientific. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning is between 2017 and 2024, really from the end of 2023 and all through 2024 and likely going into 2025, you're talking about Israel being at war with its neighbors. And Israel has not been in this level of intense warfare and battle since like 1948. I mean, this is really significant. This is a really significant thing that's going on in Israel. Israel has had multitude of rockets launched at it by different neighbors, including Iran. I mean, we're starting to get a bit desensitized by it all, but Iran launched tons of ballistic missiles over into Israel. Now, Israel's very good at intercepting them. But still, Iran launched so many missiles, and so has Hezbollah and Hamas. And in just recent days, there's been missiles launched at Jerusalem. So is this the Psalm 83 war? Is this leading to an event where Israel takes out the nuclear program of Iran and somehow maybe Jeremiah 49 gets fulfilled? We know Damascus has been in the news. Damascus has been bombed, and I mean, will Isaiah 17 be fulfilled? Will Damascus overnight basically become a ruinous heap? And so, yeah, there's been a lot of stuff going on. And there's more people on YouTube and on the internet sounding the bell for the rapture and the end times than ever before. Are we all out of our mind or perhaps God has allowed this to happen so that maybe some of us could be on the ready for the time that we live in. So yes, there is a lot going on. What about the growth of immorality and disregard for sin? Even beyond disregard for sin, a literal celebration of sin in the streets of our country and other countries around the world. An absolute celebration of sin. Are we living in a time, how Isaiah referred to it as good being called evil and evil being called good? And so if you want to consider, like I said, getting back to these evidences, are you looking at what has happened between 2017 and 2024 and think that things are going to slow down or change, or this has nothing to do with the end times? Because, brothers and sisters, you have the same Bible I have. You have access to media and the news and world events. You could search these things out. You could pray for discernment. What do you think? Has the last 7 years been prophetically insignificant, and we're in no greater place or no closer place to the rapture than ever before? That you don't see the rapture happening in your lifetime? You don't see anything of major significance in regards to the tribulation period being near? Because you certainly have the right to think that. I'm still very convinced that we're very, very close. How close? Well, I don't know. We're going to take it a day at a time. But see, what I like about tonight's study, it reminds me that there's been a lot that has happened and continues to happen. And so what TOL End Times wants to do is we want to keep watching, and we want to keep encouraging. We want to keep looking. We want to keep thinking out loud. We want to keep focusing on Christ. We want to keep doing the things God called us to do, because based on all the stuff that's been going on, I don't want to be accused of ignoring perhaps God's attention getters, to realize just the days that we live in. Because He's got my attention. Does He have your attention? So let me know in the chat. Let me know in the comment section. Let me know. What do you think about this? What do you make of all this? What do you do with all this evidences? Or is it evidences? Are they all red herrings? Is it all nothing to see here? You tell me. And let's keep each other accountable. And if you have good reason to say, Brother Chooch, this explains this, and that explains that, and I'm telling you right now, this has nothing to do with anything, then share that. So I could stop making videos and work on something else. But when I look at all this, I just have a really, really hard time dismissing all this. And so what does 2025 bring if we even get there? Well, I don't know, but based on what we've seen the last 7 years, I don't think I'd be too surprised by anything at this point. So that's the part I would want you and I to consider going forward. That was a 7-year period of time where many significant things have happened. What is God showing us, and what's yet to come? Thanks for your time. Thanks for considering this. Thank you for thinking out loud with me. And with that, I say, I hope to see you here, there, but especially in the air. God bless.